Let me just plug these stats really quickly, but there's a poll on Biden's mental and physical fitness pre and post debate. Pre debate, 27% said that he was fit mentally to run. After the debate, 20%. And then physical fitness, 21% pre debate and 15% post debate.
Welcome to Your One Podcast, where future leaders take on the complexities of today.
Everyone, to Your One Podcast, episode 34. And we know that we've been missing for a couple weeks. We've had some technical difficulties, but we're working through them. And we appreciate everybody that's listened in the past and will be consistent in the future. But on this podcast, as you know, we talk about impactful founders, people, and topics of our generation. And we invite you to join in on the conversation. Helping me do that is Micah McNeil, Felipe Segura, and Zachary Crilly. I am Gavin Farnan, and today we have a very special episode for you, which is about the debate that was had the other day with Biden and Trump, of course. But there was a lot going on during that debate. A lot of people are taking away certain topics, but I wanted to focus in on what you guys thought. I mean, in general, this is a huge turning point for everybody, and especially for founders and people trying to do something during this time. But I guess we can just start off with Micah. What did you think about the debate overall, and what's the sense check of our future presidency?
Yeah, I was very excited for the debate actually, even though it didn't include, who I eventually probably will be voting for in Bobby Kennedy. But I was very excited for it. And that quickly waned pretty quickly the minute I turned it on at 9 p.m. Just a couple of notes, I think, obviously the one that everyone's going to talk about is, obviously Biden and sort of his cognitive ability, and then the questions on like what's been happening for the last 7 months if you have a president who, in some cases look, almost clueless at some points. And it's very sad. But, I think the point that I was really getting on when I was watching it with one of my friends who had came over, and we were just like, is this really, where we're at as a country, where you just have two, sort of, older individuals who don't really seem right for the job, and they're sort of going to bat. That's my quick note. I was very sad, if I'm going to be honest with you, in watching it. I don't feel like a lot of these central topics that I care about that I really think will affect our generation, i.e. housing, the, affordability of homes, our federal debt that is at 35 trillion, to date, to speak, foreign policy. There wasn't any, sort of answers to these. It almost was like a boxing match of who was the worst president between the two. I think even one point it got to a point about golf handicaps. Like, what are we talking about? They make that argument like this guy's a child, this guy's a child. They both said that to it, but it's like, oh no, you both are children. I was, and then it's like on the world stage, it's like, this is how we look right now as a country. So that's my quick scoop. I could give you like the long version, the sad version, but that's my quick scoop in turnaround.
Let me just plug these stats really quickly, but there's a poll on Biden's mental and physical fitness pre and post debate. Pre debate, 27% said that he was fit mentally to run. After the debate, 20%. And then physical fitness, 21% pre debate and 15% post debate. And compare that with Trump, 39 pre debate, 41 post debate, and then 43% pre-debate for his physical fitness and 45% post, which is just insane. 1 in 5 people don't think that he's mentally or physically fit to run. But Felipe or Zach, do you want to give your thoughts?
It seems as if this was a real watershed moment for the country at large, especially young people, in understanding maybe in a more unable to deny sort of way the mental state of Biden. But even with that said, I mean, before it was only 27% of people thought that he was mentally capable to hold the top job in our country. It's not like we're saying that he shouldn't be, a school bus driver or a teacher or the head of a college or even an elected official and a U.S. congressman and senator. This is the head of the executive branch of the United States. I do agree with Micah that I don't know if he said it. I know that he has been a supporter of RFK Jr. and has put his money where his mouth is and gone out and volunteered for him in the past. I think that he is the winner of this debate. I think that it's an absolute moonshot that he gets elected to be president in this election cycle. But I wouldn't be surprised if he takes a fairly significant portion of the popular vote and might be the first independent candidate in the history of the U.S. to win electoral college votes. I wouldn't be surprised if this debate made a lot of people, especially young people in our generation, say, you know what, I might despise Trump, I might despise Biden, but I can in good conscience check the box next to their name in voting for them as president.
Felipe?
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up with everything everyone's saying, I mean, I think it's a watershed moment or like an actual awakening moment where you realize the White House is being run like a Weekend at Bernie's kind of situation. And I think a lot of conservatives were making jokes about Biden's mental fitness and saying, oh, he's not there. And people in the media or people who are more left-leaning were saying, no, they're just overreacting. But I think if you're leaning conservative or leaning to the left, it just became oh my goodness, this is actually real and this is as bad as it like seemed in all of its ways. And then you realize that this is the guy who's leading the quote unquote free world. This is the guy who's at all these major summits, and people are probably running laps around him, or it's very difficult to actually get anything important done that requires world leaders to come together and do, because he's not all there. And so I think it's really sad. And I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future now. Are they going to do the swap or the quote unquote swap of taking in a new candidate and pushing him in at the convention? I don't know. But I think it's just a sad day to realize, or a sad realization that we've had this for the last, 1 to 3 years. And we have him for another, 5 months, 4 months as president with a president like that. So that's just really difficult. I was concerned. Yeah.
That brings up a question that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. What is the Democratic leadership thinking? I mean, it's been a discussion. I heard people say when Biden was running for president in the 2020 election that it's going to be a Trojan horse for Kamala Harris to take over and that he wouldn't make it 2 years into his term. I think he's surprised a lot of people in making it through his whole term. People were shocked to hear that he's running again, but they said, oh, Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer, a younger person, will come and replace him. Every day that passes, that position gets weaker and weaker of the Democratic establishment and sending in a replacement. I mean, we're only 4 months out from the election at this point. What are they thinking? What is their strategy?
Yeah. And looking at the numbers here, they polled Americans on what they thought of the actual debate. And on Biden's numbers, 8% thought it was good. 19% thought just mixed, didn't really have an opinion. 73% said it was poor or terrible. So every day that they let that I guess the opinion of the Americans to sit with them is another day where they're just losing. So it's definitely a point where you just ask yourself, where can they go with that? But Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's like, yeah, how do you get the feedback loop back and then don't iterate, right? It's like
Mm.
you realize that, the overwhelming majority of Americans are like, well, we saw what we just saw with our eyes. How did you guys even, think, or what's going to be your course of action moving forward? And I think that's something that was brought up today. I think MSNBC reported that the Biden family is meeting today to discuss, what we're obviously thinking about him, relinquishing his reelection campaign. But I am very interested in what Zach said around sort of the logic that, what's been going on in these Democratic rooms, these leadership rooms for the last 7, 8 months, right? This is something that you guys know. It's what's been going on for the last 2 weeks at Camp David when you guys were prepping for this. Did you guys just think that like something was just gonna change last Thursday? And it's at the same token. It's like, what are the where's the logical bearings on this? And what they've done is they've literally tarnished a man's legacy and reputation, who has dedicated his life to public service for the last 50 years. And you've completely tarnished it. You're not going to look back at his candidacy. This is going to be the thing that gets the headline. This is going to be the thing that gets the microphone. And it's entirely sad. And by not giving the opportunity to individuals such as Dean Phillips or RFK or, even Tulsi Gabbard for, to her credit, and opening up the DNC, you subjugated a man who is in the waning years of his life and his cognitive ability, and you've almost supplemented him into this position of reelection. And by doing so, and last Thursday we all had the opportunity of seeing, you've destroyed his reputation. And it's so sad for me to think about that. So when I'm watching that with my friend who I had over, I'm just like, I almost thought I was on a psychedelic trip, because I was like, this can't be real. This is not the United States. And how we look on the world stage is just totally dormant right now. And I don't know who brought it up. I think it was Zach on the world stage. Come on, Iran, fucking, sorry, excuse my language, China and Russia, they're probably licking their chops at this, at what just occurred on Thursday, and what's continue going forward. So,
And even beyond our adversaries, who we should be very concerned about, even our friends. I mean, I cannot imagine what the upper echelons of friendly governments across Europe, across South America are thinking when they see these two people debating, and knowing that these are going to have to be their counterparts, that they're going to have very serious conversations with and depend on for security, for economic prosperity. And just anecdotally, I went out to dinner the night after that, and the waiter said, "Oh, where are you guys from?" And we said, "Oh, the U.S." And he goes, "Gosh, did you see that debate? I'm not even American, but how embarrassing that must be." And after he left, I had some friends that were European at the table, and they said, "Hey, how do you feel about a waiter saying how embarrassing your country is?" And I was like, "It sucks." I would love to. I am so proud of my heritage and of my nation, and to feel that not be reflected in our leadership, especially in our executive, is it stinks. It really does. And two things there that I think come from that is, one, I think that we have maybe one or two more terms of a not great, not strong president before other countries are really going to start to just write us off. I mean, we've already seen Russia making moves in expansion, other countries making moves in an aggressive sense because of a weak executive. I think that is a real threat, because the American perception is a very powerful asset that we have. Two, I see large amounts of apathy in young people, young American people, towards the political system. And I think that that's an even bigger threat. Because if young Americans don't see any way out of this, there's real trouble on the horizons.
Yeah, to that point, I was gonna see what your thoughts were around the difference between generations of who does this hurt the most. I mean, I was talking with my parents, for example, and they're even saying this similar ideas to us of like, how can we move forward? What are these two candidates we have? But in terms of what this does for our generation and what our perception on the debate is, and just the options we have and moving forward after this, like, what do you think the resulting effect will be because of these two poor candidates? Like, do you think we'll be able to accept a third party more, or do you think we just will be more likely to vote younger and kind of a stronger candidate? What do you think that lasting effect will be with these two?
Felipe, you want to touch that first?
Yeah, I can jump in on this. I think we don't know what will be the result of putting up two candidates that are very unpopular. One seems to really not be all there, and then one is just very disliked, that you can already see a lot of people just voting against him just because they don't like the guy, that being Donald Trump. But I actually think the biggest loser of all of this is legacy media. I think legacy media had the opportunity to point this out about Biden's cognitive decline years in advance. And they were kind of setting up this debate to be like, oh yeah, he's going to put up a solid performance, and, Donald Trump's just going to lie. I mean, if you spend all of your time following this guy around the country, you're in the same plane as him, always doing interviews, and you're always next to people within the administration, you probably would have known about the decline that President Biden is undergoing. And the fact that they didn't report that, and that they've been saying for a while, oh, he's totally fine. I think Jim Scarborough said he is the most mentally fit Biden he's ever met. And this, I think, was a few weeks ago. I think that legacy that is going to stay with legacy media as a little bit of we probably can't trust them, especially younger generations, is just saying like, there's not really they're not being really fair in a sense, or non-biased, that there's an agenda. And yeah, I mean, that's not great for the future, having people disenfranchised. I think the people that win at the end of it are a lot of people who are skeptical of media. Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, who've gone on X now more and have been criticizing traditional media. So I think those are kind of one of those hidden winners in all of this. But yeah.
I think, Gavin, to answer your question, I think we are the generation that has to bear the consequences of this in full front. And on past episodes, we've got into it. Housing is astronomical. The pricing of goods and food is astronomical, from supply chain issues to just overspending that we don't have as a country. I think, I actually know. Trump spent $8 trillion against the deficit. Biden is at 4 to 5 and increasing by the week, against the deficit. These are consequences that our generation is going to have to bear. And neither one of them, when they were asked, Trump didn't say anything about federal debt. He actually turned it back around to some earlier conversation that they were having about suckers and losers, and something related to the military, when, bipartisan, if we actually want to get to the topic, neither one of the parties actually really does anything for veterans at the end of the day, if we really want to get onto it. There was no answers to any questions. So I guess what I'm saying all that to say is that there's all this like bearing on how bad Biden was, and I'm all in agreement of that, right? And we can say that Trump is way better. Like, no, Trump is like obviously like cognitively better, for whatever it's worth. But Trump didn't give any answers to any of these real questions that were asked. To CNN's credit, I'm actually going to give them credit for one time. The interviewers did ask great questions, but never received any actual answers. There were no actual answers to questions that relate to foreign policy. There were nothing related to the fact that home prices are astronomical or federal debt is astronomical, inflation is astronomical. There were no real solutions or actual policy adjustments from either side. So the winners, there are no winners. Your parents are the older generations who have assets. They're going to be fine. But our generation, we're not going to be able to bear them. We talked about this on past topics, right? On past episodes. And this was like the real part that I was like really getting sad about when I was watching, because I was like, dude, like, what is our generation going to do? And to Zach's point, I think he was bringing up at his louder point, when you don't have a society that believes in the society, right, or believes in the fulfillment of working hard and having these things that you want as a human, as a citizen, that's gonna lead to problems, right? That's gonna lead to people actually maybe physical problems when you don't believe in the value proposition that at one point that country did offer to you. So again, that was my long-winded answer to answer your question. Our generation is going to have to bear the consequences, and it's a sad reality because neither side or neither faction is actually, focused on that.
Yeah,
and it's sad.
But it's not only that our generation faces the consequence; it's a double bad for us, because not only do we face the consequences of real issues that need to be solved not being solved, but also the means by which we can now choose another candidate or find someone who can offer a solution is tainted, because, and this is where I think my thought is that media isn't like trusted as much with each passing day from stuff like that. Right?
I would say it differently. I would say media doesn't uphold people who actually want a solution. They're fine with the status quo, is how I would word it. They're fine with, Biden, we're just gonna say he's great, even though we're watching the reality that he's not great. And then on the other hand, we're just gonna say that, Trump is great, but we know he's not too great either. I would say they just keep the status quo, where it's like they're not solution or journalistic savvy, which they should be. And because of that, because we're receiving that feedback as users, we're like, we're not going to listen to you guys anymore. And I think that's happening, where, to your point, I think you were trying to get at, Felipe, is people like Joe Rogan or a Tucker Carlson going independent, or other figures, maybe the All In guys as an example. That's where people are going to for their media and actual feedback. But I don't know if it's enough in the influx. I think our generation's doing that, but I think older generations still watch cable TV. So
yeah, but
I'm going to take an all. Oh, please finish the point.
No, I 100% agree with that, Micah. And yeah, I mean, it is definitely, though, accelerating alternative media, because there's now going to be a new generation of people to tell you the truth. I mean, we watched, a couple of us here watched the All In pod with Trump, and they asked him real questions and he gave some real answers to them, as opposed to a debate held by CNN. So, yeah, right on.
To your original question, Gavin, and the answers, I think that it's obvious what you guys are saying, that the biggest losers in this case is our generation, certainly, by the mere fact that we're going to have to bear the burden of this society for longer. But with that being said, I refer back to one of our founding fathers, John Adams, and his quote that every problem is an opportunity in disguise. And if there's one thing that our country is great at, it's finding a way through difficult times. And I noticed in the wake of this debate a unifying fact, in that everybody that I either read comments online or talked to agrees that both candidates aren't great. And although that's a terrible state for this current election, I think that brings up an important opportunity, in the fact that we now have, in every election cycle, presidential election cycle, that our generation has been able to vote in, it's a lesser of two evils choice, and I think that that is going to lead to the stronger potential for a viable third party. It's something that we've talked about before. It's something that we'll keep on talking about. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long amount of time. But in a way, I see that as being one of the only solutions to this, because we've seen how this has happened. If we flash back to 2019 in preparation for the 2020 election, there was a debate stage of 20 plus Democrats, right, that were running. A lot of them competent people that would have been strong leaders for our country. And we ended up with who we have now. And the same is true of the 2016 Republican election cycle. And I think that there is a real opportunity here for unification in the discontent, and for solutions being found in that discontent.
And one question here is like, what do you say to a 24-year-old that has potentially lost faith?
No.
And is just saying, I'll move.
I
to
say
another
go
country,
try
build
your
my
best in
life
other countries. I think that America is unique because of our radical free markets and our radical individualism. And I think that if that's something
You
that
don't
you
think
believe
there's
in, then
another
it's
country
worth
out
fighting
there
for, and
that's-
it's worth dying
that can
for.
provide
And that's
the
something
same
that I believe in strongly. And
opportunity?
if it's something that I will never stop pursuing, and I will always have faith that there's a kernel of this country that is at its foundation an ideology that is worth fighting for and that can be saved. I think that the only answer to that is, what are we doing now? Because we've been advancing down that path for a number of years. And this is where I give kudos
what would you
to
be willing
my
to do
fellow
if it
podcaster
does
here,
go down
Micah,
that path?
because he's put his money where his mouth is and has gotten out there and knocked on doors for an independent campaign. I think that is the way forward. Is okay. Talk is cheap, and people love to complain, especially young people. But what can you actually do? Help to build an alternative. Help to be the change that you want to see in the world.
Amen. Totally agree. I'm gonna be honest. I guess I want to turn this back on you guys. What is your sort of projection or theory, for the next month? What ends up happening with Biden? Do you think he's going to be the presidential, option, come November, an election? I think hell no. Well, let me give my answer first. I think hell no. I think that they're gonna do a hot swap by Sunday of next week.
I don't think that there's any reasonable pathway that he doesn't, and frankly, I hope that he doesn't, because I think that will show even more instability in our political system if the president is swapped out 4 months before the election. I think that this thing just plays out, and that I hope that this thing just plays out, and that we learn our lesson from it moving forward.
Yeah. So I mean, I would one. I'm sorry, Gavin and Felipe. I want to hear your guys' take first, but and then I have a follow-up question.
Okay, I'll say I don't know what they're gonna do. I think, Zach, just like you pointed out, there are pros and cons to doing both. It's not that clear though that if you just hot swap Gavin Newsom or whoever in for Biden that he's gonna win in 4 months. I think a lot of people are gonna be freaked out. There's not a lot of vetting on the candidate himself that can come, and there's a lot of stuff that can come out in 4 months in between then, and you're unprepared, all that. But my biggest thing is, why try to predict? Why not just, I think we've come to the realization that the people are not the ones choosing the candidate, especially in the Democrat side, okay? They've rigged this thing from the beginning. It's like House of Dragon, dude. Don't pick a side. Just stay at just like sit back and watch the chaos unfold. Game of Thrones style, just see what happens and be like, all right, now I'm going to go vote and choose the best candidate. Yeah.
That's a good point. It is a house of cards. Gav? Yeah.
I mean, I hope that they do the logical decision and replace Biden, because it's just a losing game. They've already lost, so why are we letting that play out? Why don't we pick a better option? Like, even if it is Gavin Newsom, I mean, he's a very popular
Well,
candidate in
I'll tell you
general,
this:
and a lot
there's
of
no
people
chance
vote.
I'm voting
So I
for
don't
the
think it would be
Democrats
that
if
big of
Gavin Newsom is who they. He's a terrible.
It's worked before. It's worked
Yeah,
before.
no, it has worked before. I mean, it's actually like he's very, and he's
But
very
do you think he
articulate
would
to
win
his
it?
credit. But he is a terrible leader. I
That
do have
might be
another
enough,
question.
though.
Gunder had, who do you think is going to be our next president?
I don't see a way in which Trump does not get the presidency again. I mean, unless
Same.
with Gavin, the statistics that you said, 20% of people now see Joe Biden as being mentally competent to hold that office, or mentally competent, period. It will be interesting to see what percentage of the country votes to him and what the delta of those two numbers are. Because I don't want to be dramatic, but I think that it's unpatriotic to vote for somebody who you don't believe is going to be a good leader. I certainly won't be voting for either one of these guys.
Yeah, I think me either. But I think my heart says, and if you put a gun to my head, I would say Donald Trump, in the scenario that my guy Bobby doesn't get the mass national distribution. If he does, if that ends up changing and he's able to get the mass distribution that he deserves, then I 100% believe he'll be our next president. But if he does not, which like we were saying, like the status quo of like media and just most people just don't know about Bobby Kennedy. Most people don't know that he's polling at 16% nationally. Most people don't know that his real debate that he did streamed over 11 million people that were watching it. People just don't know about it because they have no means of finding out about it. But gun to my head, it's gonna be Donald Trump. I mean, it can't be Biden, right? Come on. Could ask a fifth grader that question. Gav?
I think you bring up a very interesting point in the fact that the results of the election will really prove like the amount of Americans that are almost eating their pride in a way. Like, how many will actually vote for Biden that ultimately don't want that to be the case? Like, that would be super interesting to see if those types of people will go third party as well, due to the fact that neither of the choices are favorable. So but for me, I think it's still too early for a third party to win. I don't think that he'll get the media like Micah was saying. So I just have to go with Trump if they're not going to put somebody else
I agree.
in.
I think that's what I'm most election cycles, because I think that's going to be down fairly significantly.
So I mean, I think we can close there.
I agree.
Can we?
All right, young people, this is our two guys for this election cycle. They're not great, and we need to do better in the future. That's the MO of this episode.
Roll Tide.